11 confirmed kills in 96 hours. It sounds like a statistic from a modern tactical shooter, but this was Guadalcanal, 1942, and the weapon used wasn't a standard-issue military rifle, but a civilian hunting piece ordered from a catalog. While the official history books celebrate the M1 Garand, the men on the ground were discovering a terrifying reality. Their tools were failing. Breathe. To understand why a Marine sergeant would risk court-martial to carry a Winchester Model 70 into combat, we have to look at the jungle itself. The green hell. The canopy of the Solomons didn't just block the sun. It created a world of perpetual twilight and deep shifting shadows. Japanese doctrine had adapted to this perfectly, utilizing spider holes and tree ties to become invisible assassins. Official U.S. Marine doctrine relied on massed infantry fire and the bayonet charge, tactics developed in the open fields of France during the Great War. But the jungle doesn't respect tradition. When we analyze the engagement logs from the early weeks of the campaign, a disturbing pattern emerges in the casualty reports. Marines were dying from single, Kaichin precise shots to the head and neck, often before they ever saw an enemy soldier. Breathe. Panic is a contagion. As the unseen enemy picked off patrol leaders and radio operators, the morale of the unit began to fracture under the strain of the unknown.
I think they're above us.
The men weren't afraid of fighting. They were afraid of being helpless. The standard issue M1903 Springfield was a robust bolt-action rifle. But in the low-contrast environment of the jungle, its iron sights were a death sentence. Iron sights rely on light. In the deep shade, the rear aperture and the front post blended into a single, blurry mass of gray steel against green foliage. Breathe. And then there was the trigger mechanism, military grade, mass-produced, and gritty. We are talking about a trigger pull with nearly 5 pounds of erratic, unpredictable creep, detailed as slack in the manual. That slack meant that at the precise moment a Marine needed to fire, he was fighting the mechanics of his own weapon, pulling the muzzle off target. It was a blunt instrument trying to perform brain surgery. Enter Sergeant John George. While his peers carried government steel, he unpacked a polished, checkered stock sporting rifle fitted with a Unertl telescopic sight. The mockery was instant. Officers dismissed it as a pop gun, and the infantrymen joked about him going squirrel hunting while the rest of them fought a war. They saw a toy. He saw the only engineering solution capable of countering the Japanese optic advantage. Breathe. The official reports listed the lack of sniper equipment as a logistical oversight. But for the men pinned down in the mud, that oversight was measured in blood. They called it the rifleman's rifle. While the Corps issued mass-produced tools for mass-produced soldiers, the Winchester Model 70 was a precision instrument built for the discerning civilian market. Sergeant George wasn't carrying a weapon, he was carrying a systemic advantage. Let's break down the engineering disparity. The standard military optic of the time was often non-existent or crude. George mounted an 8-power Unertl target scope. Breathe. This changed the physics of the battlefield. In the low-light conditions of the jungle floor, the Unertl's large objective lens gathered available photons like a funnel, turning the murky gray shadows into crisp, high-contrast images. While the enemy was hidden to the naked eye, to George, they were illuminated in high definition. But the optics were only half the equation. The critical variable was the trigger mechanism. Breathe. Zero creep. Instant break. Unlike the gritty military two-stage triggers, George's customized trigger broke like a glass rod at 2.5 pounds of pressure. This eliminated the micro-muscle tremors that throw a shot off by inches at 200 yards. It was a violation of every uniform regulation in the book. unauthorized modification of weaponry, carrying non-standard ammunition, a court-martial offense on paper. But as the casualty counts mounted, the officers looked the other way. They didn't need regulations. They needed a solution that could reach out and touch the ghosts in the trees. Brief. 4 days. 11 kills. George didn't just patrol, he hunted. He vanished into the foliage, moving not like a soldier invading territory, but like a predator, entering his own living room. The mocked mail-order rifle was about to prove its worth in blood. The Japanese snipers relied on patience. They would tie themselves high in the canopy, waiting for hours, sometimes days, for a target to present itself. George beat them at their own game. On the second day, deep in the Matanikau River basin, his spotter caught a glint of movement, a shift in the texture of a palm frond 50 yards out. Breathe. A standard infantryman would have sprayed the tree line with a Thompson or a BAR, hoping to suppress the threat through volume. Volume is noise. Precision is finality. George settled the crosshairs. The 8 times magnification cut through the humidity. He could see the helmet netting. He could see the rifle stock. He exhaled. The report of the Winchester was different, sharper, distinct from the dull thud of the Springfields. There was no return fire, no scattering birds, just the heavy sound of a body hitting the jungle floor. It worked. Breathe. For 96 hours, this pattern repeated. He moved, he waited, he engaged. He was systematically dismantling the enemy's sniper network, one trigger pull at a time. Silence replaces ridicule. When George returned to the perimeter, the jokes about squirrel hunting had evaporated. The men looked at the polished wood stock with a newfound reverence. Results have a way of silencing critics. News of his success traveled through the whisper network of the Pacific Theater faster than official communiques. Adaptation is survival. Other units began to scavenge. If they couldn't get a Winchester, they modified their Springfields. They wrote home asking for scopes. They started painting their barrels to reduce glare. We see a fundamental shift in the unit's psychology, the realization that the standard issue was merely a suggestion. Junior officers, desperate to keep their men alive, began authorizing field modifications that would have horrified a garrison inspector. The mail-order rifle became the totem of a new philosophy. Use what works, not just what you're given. The rules had changed. Breathe. On the other side of the lines, the psychological impact was devastating. The hunter became the hunted. Captured Japanese diaries from this period reveal a growing confusion. They had been told the Americans were soft, loud, and reliant on heavy artillery. They were not prepared for precision counterfire. One diary entry notes the terror of their positions being identified without a single tracer round being fired. They could no longer operate with impunity. Every tree was a potential death trap. The Japanese snipers were forced to change their tactics. They had to move more often, exposing themselves. They had to shoot faster, missing more often.
We have to keep moving, don't stop!
George had broken their rhythm. By introducing a variable the enemy hadn't accounted for, a high-velocity, optically sighted precision rifle, he forced a superior enemy force to degrade their own performance. It wasn't just about the 11 men he killed, it was about the hundreds of others he terrified into making mistakes. The war didn't wait for the paperwork. While Sergeant George's Winchester eventually faded from the front lines, the lesson he taught the Marine Corps was permanent. The age of the mass infantry volley was dying. The age of the precision specialist had begun. Breathe. By late 1943, the Corps began officially issuing the M1903A1 fitted with You guessed it, the 8-power unertl scope. The illegal civilian solution had become the standard for the deadliest snipers in the Pacific Theater. John George didn't receive a Medal of Honor for his 4-day hunt. There are no statues of him holding his mail-order rifle in the town square. But statues don't save lives. We estimate that by eliminating those 11 key enemy assets, George likely preserved the lives of 80 to 100 Marines who would have otherwise walked into ambushes. That is a legacy measured not in ribbons, but in grandfathers who came home to hold their grandchildren. His story stands as the ultimate testament to a fundamental engineering truth that echoes through every conflict since. True innovation never comes from a committee. It comes from the individual who refuses to wait for permission to do what is necessary. History is often written by the victors, but the details are written by the survivors. Sergeant George didn't care about doctrine. He cared about the man standing next to him. In the silence of the jungle, a mail-order rifle spoke louder than 1,000 regulations. It reminds us that true ingenuity isn't found in a manual. It's forged in the fire of necessity. We honor the mavericks and the quiet professionals who change the world, one unauthorized modification at a time.